Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Hakuna Matata, Hakuna Matata, Hakuna Matata, Hakuna Matata.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. More Disney fun is on the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cosmic Ray is proud to present the biggest little star in the galaxy. Direct from New-York City on the planet Zork, put your hands together for Sunny Eclipse and the amazing Astro Organ.
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mangello, and this is show number 650. Wow, 650 episodes. Thank you so very much. None of this would be possible without you, because together, as we have for the past nearly 17 years, we're going to continue to celebrate the magic of the Disney parks, movies, and more here on the podcast, the weekly live video, in the community, and so much more. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, tell a friend, and find everything else at WDWRadio.com. So speaking of celebrating, this week we're going to celebrate the legacy of Star Wars as we examine the top 10 most important moments in Star Wars history. From the mind of George Lucas to the big and small screens, parks, toys, what's new and next, there are entries on our list that might not only surprise you, but touch and connect with even the most casual Star Wars fan. I'll then have the answer to our Disney Trivia Question of the Week and more updates at the end of the show. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show. A long time ago, and I almost don't have to even finish that, do I? Iconic does not even begin to describe Star Wars. And saying that it fundamentally changed the course of history isn't hyperbole, because on May 25th, 1977, it wasn't just movie going that had changed, but movie making, science fiction, storytelling, collecting, characters, fandom, the list goes on and on and on. And if I ask you to close your eyes, not while you're driving, and think of Star Wars, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? And why? Is it a personal memory? Is it a toy under the Christmas tree? Is it a moment from a movie? Because there's no right or wrong answer, because that's the beauty of fandom, Star Wars or otherwise. And it's why this week we're going to look at the top 10-ish moments in Star Wars history, and not just from the movies, but the Star Wars universe as a whole. More on that later. And while I fell in love with Star Wars as a 9-year-old kid with his dad on an early summer's day at Middlesex Mall's Theater in New Jersey, I am far, far from the biggest Star Wars enthusiast, collector, nerd, which is a term of endearment, or even podcaster, which is why I brought along some expert help in the form of not one, but two Star Wars superfans who have literally made it their lives and their businesses to talk about and share what they love with others. I want to welcome back Mr. Ryan Donahoe from the Forcecast podcast.
Lou, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This topic got my mind all over the place. So we're going to see where this ends up, but I'm very excited.
I am incredibly excited and super curious as well. Again, acknowledging that you and those who are going to be joining me next, including podcaster, author Dan Zier from Coffee with Kenobi, decide to go. Dan, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Lou. It's good to see both of you here talking about one of my favorite topics. I'm very excited to strap in and jump to Lightspeed. We got some lots. Boy, that is why I'm a successful podcaster, because of vernacular like that. I'm ready to go.
And I was going to say, look, it's like a little microcosm of a Star Wars nerd convention. And exactly, this is exactly what it is. You've got your Star Wars shirt on. I've got my Star Wars underoos on. Ryan's hugging his Star Wars pillow. So it is completely appropriate. And thankfully, we're not doing video. But very quickly, give me the Reader's Digest abbreviated 1 or 2 sentence version of your fandom story. How did you start out? When you went from fan to creator, and why? Right? What is it for you about Star Wars, Ryan, and then Dan?
Well, unlike you two fine gentlemen, I am what would be classified as the prequel generation. So our stories are going to be a little bit different. I actually was.
He always does that, doesn't he?
Yeah, I got a few. Actually, that's my whole notes just says just keep saying stuff like that. No, but yeah, I was young when the special editions came in the late '90s, and that's where my dad, who was a fan since day one, took me to go see Star Wars on the big screen, episodes 4, 5, 6, or the original trilogy. And I was just enthralled. I was in elementary school at the time in the late '90s, and I was just enthralled by Star Wars. This the first time I ever saw it was on the big screen. And then in 1999, I felt like it was my turn to get my Star Wars movies. And I saw The Phantom Menace like 15 times in the theaters as I kept making my dad take me back. And from then on, I have just been enthralled by this universe. It's been the first and one of the only few things that I've still watched to this day where I feel a deep investment in wanting to go and experience that universe. I'm still trying, like we all are with things that we grow up with, to capture that very first sit down with my dad in the theater in the late 90s and just still trying to capture that feeling. And I've had similar experiences all throughout the next 30 plus years that I've been experiencing Star Wars. I'm still getting something from it, and it's still such an investment for me. And that feeling as a 6, 7, and 8 year old going to the theater seeing it has never gone away. And now, I'm doing this podcast, and I'm friends with Dan here because of Star Wars, and it continues to introduce me to people and places I never would have experienced or met if it wasn't for Star Wars.
Yeah, there is something special about that first time, right? That first experience, that moment with your dad or your son or whatever it might be. Quickly, before we go to Dan, what is just to sort of set the context, favorite Star Wars movie and favorite Star Wars character?
Favorite Star Wars movie because of the nostalgia. I think it's similar to you. Why A New Hope will probably stay close to your favorite of all time is The Phantom Menace. It is. I can remember as a kid. I still, these are weird, vivid memories that I have, but when I walk in and there's a giant Frito-Lay Pepsi Mace Windu standee at the grocery store, and it was literally everywhere. I remember going to Toys R Us and getting the toys. So that film is so still nostalgic for me. And then when I turn it on, I think it's the most pure George Lucas movie of all time, The Phantom Menace. And so for me, my favorite, and no matter what I see, because I like the sequel trilogy, I like it all. But The Phantom Menace still holds a special place in my heart. And I got to get this in. I was trying to figure out where to do it, but I'll just say, yippee. So there we go.
Good night, everybody. We're done here.
Looks like we're out of bandwidth.
So who's your and favorite character then?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Obi-Wan Kenobi.
You just redeemed yourself in a big way.
I'm excited about the Kenobi series, but I think that's been one of the most in-depth characters that we've got to see from young age to final days is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Is it Alec Guinness Obi-Wan Kenobi or Ewan McGregor, or is it just one character for you? It
is more Ewan McGregor because we've had more Ewan McGregor, but my favorite version of Obi-Wan is the original Star Wars, and it really centers around that moment in his hut on Tatooine talking to Luke and kind of breaking down the universe for him. That still to this day just resonates with me. So Alec Guinness plays my favorite version of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I was going to do a really, really bad Alec Guinness hello there impression, but I won't. I'm not going to do it. Dan Zier, same questions for you. Your fandom story, movie, and character.
Wow. Well, how much time do you have? How much balance do you have for the rest of the month? Minute and a half. Okay, gotcha. Well, when I was younger, we weren't allowed to see PG movies. So when Star Wars came out, I saw the commercials and I thought it looked amazing. And my cousin had told my parents, "Hey, it's PG, but it's safe. There's no blood, and I think the kids will like it." We went 4, 5, 6 times to see it. It was always sold out. And then on one fateful day, my dad pulled down this gravel road and he rolled down the window of this small little booth and he said, "For Star Wars." So the first time I ever saw Star Wars was at a drive-in movie theater in New Orleans, Louisiana in the summer of 1978. It was the only time Star Wars was showing at drive-in movie theaters. And what I remember specifically about is just kind of looking at Star Wars literally under the stars, which led to action figures and T-shirts and Lite-Brite and Lego and Marvel and all kinds of stuff. I've never slowed down, even in the dark times of the late 80s to the mid 90s. I would still scrape the barrel for anything Star Wars I could. Timothy Zahn's there. The Empire comes out. I gobble that up. Then Hasbro starts selling new versions of Star Wars action figures, famously Luke Skywalker looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger sculpts. And I've never looked back. Eventually led to a podcast called Coffee with Kenobi, which led to writing for Lucasfilm and Disney. And a couple of books later, I'm still smiling and drinking in this galaxy far, far away all of the time with my family, with my friends. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
Movie and character.
Well, like you, it's Jar Jar Binks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually do like Jar Jar, but Lou's going to slam him, so we're just going to get it out of the way now. No, it's The Empire Strikes Back. But The Empire Strikes Back and then A New Hope is sort of like 1 and 1A. To be honest, The Last Jedi is probably the best made of any Star Wars movie, but The Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars for sure. And it's totally Darth Vader because as an English teacher by day, I find Anakin Skywalker to be the most Shakespearean, the most complex, the most fascinating to break down, to analyze. I've actually used Anakin Skywalker to teach Hamlet, and I just think he's a fantastic character.
I was going to say half jokingly, but I don't. And listen, when I make jokes, I don't want people to get mad because they're just jokes. I'm kidding around. Which actor do you prefer, Hayden? Which actor has a wider dynamic range of emotion? Is it Jake Lloyd or Hayden Christensen? But again, not going down that road at all. For me, and I think I've said this before, A New Hope. I'm not saying it's better than Empire or one is better, but for me, New Hope is my Star Wars, and and I love origin stories, and I love the dirt and the grittiness about that film, and even just sort of how it was made. And like you, I'm an Obi-Wan Kenobi fan through and through. So before we get into the list, I will tell you, I think. It's an interesting list to try and put together. And sort of how difficult is it for you, who are such deep fans, to try and not only come up with these moments, but then to sort of rank them? Because what I was finding was I sort of had this brain dump, which is what I normally do. And I'm like, wow, I had a lot more things on my list than I thought. And then trying to limit it to 10-ish, knowing that there's going to be overlap, was even more difficult, because then I got to how do I leave this out, right? How do I possibly leave this moment out? And what I think we would do is we'll go around the horn, and then at the end, we'll sort of try and agree upon a list of maybe the 3, in whatever order we decide, if we can agree upon or not, the 3 of the most iconic, the most important, the most memorable Star Wars moments. And again, I want to acknowledge that while my fandom does not go as deep into even all the things that are on the small screen, certainly not the books and things like that. You are welcome to include anything on the list that you feel is appropriate, because I will tell you that there's a couple of mine that are a little bit outside the 4 corners to a certain degree. So because you are my guests and because I am so wildly curious, again, we'll sort of keep the same order, Ryan and Dan, and then I'll go, and we'll sort of go round robin. So Ryan, you can do what you think is number 10 on your list and work your way down to 1, or start with the one that you don't want Dan to steal.
Well, I've got a few that I know at least you, Lou, will not steal. So we'll save those for later. But I was thinking about this topic, and it's got me thinking because, there was really no criteria for this top 10. So I was thinking, do I think of all the moments in universe that I think fans will recognize as these things happen in universe, in a movie, in a TV show, that we all kind of understand this is such a big moment and why. I think we sometimes point to moments like the Chewie "we're home" moment in The Force Awakens when Chewie and Han get back on there. I think that's a moment we could all stand and cheer. And if I stole somebody, sorry. I'm just copying Lou. You just throw 7 in, and when you do 1. But I was thinking about what happens in real life, right? Like not meta, not in universe, events that have happened since 1977 or before 1977 that kind of have helped define the Star Wars saga. And I think we might get into some of those. But I did want to start. This is one that I think this is actually in universe. This is a moment in a film that I think to me ranks as number 1 in all the films, all, 11 films, television shows, everything, books, you name it. This moment is the number 1 moment in any Star Wars film for me. So in meta, in universe for this one, for me, is the moment where Luke throws his lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. So we all know the big epic finale, Return of the Jedi. George Lucas is one of his best things he does is finales of movies. Like he ends his movies very well. It's always the Death Star trench or Empire Strikes Back, that just powerful ending of them staring out into space. And then Return of the Jedi to me has the best ending in all of Star Wars. And you have this moment leading up where Luke has helped redeem his father. He's brought Anakin Skywalker back. You're face down with the Emperor. What's going to happen? Everything seems to be coming to a close. And Luke starts to have his anger overtake him. He chops his father's hand off, and he looks at his mechanical hand. The Emperor is like, well, no matter what happens here, I've either got Luke on my side now, or if Vader survives, I've got Vader. The Emperor has won. He thinks he's won. Luke turns, he looks up, throws his lightsaber. He says, "You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi like my father before me." That to me, if you ask somebody says, what is the true meaning of Star Wars? What is the lesson we take from Star Wars? I would point to that moment. The moment that Luke throws his lightsaber, doesn't care what happens to him next, and says, "You failed, Your Highness." And he tells him that I am a Jedi like my father before me. And then, of course, the Emperor says, "Then you will die," and shocks him, and he lands on the ground. But that also leads to Vader picking him up, throwing him down the shaft. And that, to me, is my favorite Star Wars moment. It's number 1 in all of Star Wars, is the moment Luke looks at his mechanical hand, realizes what he's becoming, throws the lightsaber. And that to me defines in 1, 2, 3 scenes, however many scenes you want to consider that defines what Star Wars really means. That's the purpose of Star Wars to me. Wow.
So I say wow because it wasn't on my list. It didn't make the cut for me, which is what I love about having all of us on here together, is that everybody's list is going to be a little bit different. Dan, was it on your list? Yay or nay, and what do you think? And then move on to your first or best.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a wonderful moment. Honestly, nothing from the movies is specifically on my list. I went a little more esoteric into sort of the creation of Star Wars and the building blocks of what set this universe so that we can have that moment at the end of Return of the Jedi when Luke shows pacifism and benevolence over anger and hate. He chooses the light side. He's arguably one of the only Jedis in the history of Star Wars besides Ahsoka Tano that chooses that path. So I absolutely love Ryan's, but I knew that he would bring his A game, which is why I've got my first. So now I'm not going to come out with my top one right off the bat. I'm going to save that for the end. But for me, it's from 1962. A young George Lucas grows up in San Anselmo, California, a massive fan of racing, of race cars. He's got this contemptuous relationship with his father, who thinks George is wasting his time and his life. George builds and designs these race cars, and he wants to be a racer. Like, that is his dream. That is his passion. And in 1962, and he gets in this horrible car accident where the jaws of life have to get him out of this vehicle. And by all rights, he should have been dead. I mean, he really should have. It was that bad. The police and the first responders on the scene said that it was a miracle that this young man survived. when he gets out of this crash and he starts to recover, as he's lying in the hospital, he decides, I'm giving up racing. I think I'm going to start looking a little more seriously into movies and going to film school, which he eventually does at USC. But if not for that fateful crash, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes life will throw you wrinkles that at the time seem horrible, but they can slingshot you to a better tomorrow. And that's exactly what George did when he got in that car accident.
Wow. I actually did not know that. So what I love about this is that we're all going to learn something, I think, along the way as well. Although now all I hear is little Anna going, now this is pod racing. Whatever. Moving on. I, like you, the first thing that came to mind, the first thing that fell out of my head and onto paper, as it were, was not necessarily about a scene from a movie. And when I say this, I'll explain why, because I think it's going to make very clear sense. Believe it or not, I think that George Lucas's brilliant decision and foresight before the movie ever even hit screens to retain the rights to the toys, literally, it changed the fabric of society going forward. Look, and I say this, we know how important as kids the action figures were to us. I still have my original 12 and my mail-away stand and all those things and all the toys, and I still have my Han Solo blaster from 1977 sitting behind me. We know how important those toys were to sort of play in and live in that universe. And Lucas's brilliance to forego, at the time, a large sum of money for what seemed like relatively probably minor requests, which is he wanted the rights to the sequels and he wanted all of the merchandising rights, because toys and action figures based on films, especially this weird space opera that he was trying to pull together, were unheard of at the time. And forget about how much money it made George Lucas, but it changed how the entire movie making and comic and everything industry approached merchandise as a whole. And after hundreds of patents and thousands of trademark applications and multiple thousand registered copyrights, he has always remained very persistent in the protection of the IP of this franchise. Even, you can't use the word droid without paying George Lucas a couple of dollars. And the fascinating story about trying to find, at first it was Kenner and then later Hasbro to take on this licensing deal and manufactured, and that small amount of money or large at the time that he gave up in the, we'll call it $350,000 range at the time, ends up translating to $4 or $5 billion, which one could argue may be one of the most intelligent, profitable business decisions that anyone has ever made. And not to sort of get off topic, but I think that there's a life business lesson and takeaway from this. Like, I'll use a Walt quote, if you believe in a thing unquestionably, and stick to your guns as George did, and decide to retain those rights, the payoff, literally and figuratively, will be huge. And we as Star Wars fans benefited, because think about all the stuff that we have collected over the years, and looking at all of our backgrounds, all the things that we continue to amass all these years later.
Yeah. And to that point, it still is able to connect us all, despite us all having different experiences, because even though I am a little bit younger than you guys, I didn't get the Kinder night. I didn't have to mail anything away, but when it was 1999 and the Phantom Menace toys were releasing, my dad having that same experience and doing the mail away figures in Kinder and having the tin lunchbox and everything, he goes, "Oh, we're going to Toys R Us and we're buying every single thing in that building." And I still have the puppet Yoda figure sitting in his Jedi Council chair. I still have Jar Jar in the card. By the way, I've not opened them. And that's only because I had 15 of them. So, because they were giving them away at some point. But, my son, who is about to turn 6, Dan mentioned earlier, the buff Power of the Force figures from the 90s. My son has all of those. And he's playing with them to this day. And he's got my Millennium Falcon, and it connects it was an ultimate bet on yourself move by George, but it also connects us all because we've all got that one item. We've all got that one story or that one trip to the store when we saw that figure or that ship that we had to have. And it's not just genius for George because his pocketbook looks nice. It's also genius because that connects the fans and the audience still to this day. So I think that's a brilliant move.
George Lucas literally.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say George Lucas literally changed the way movies are made, marketed, and sold. I mean, yeah, original figures. His genius that you mentioned, Lou, changed the fabric of merchandising. This is where you say your Spaceballs quote. No
merchandising.
There you go. Every time.
Spaceballs, the flamethrower. The kids love it.
I still have mine in package. He not only did that, but because of Star Wars and the Star Wars brand, he saved Marvel Comics from bankruptcy in the 70s. And a little known company named Lego was about to go under, if not for the Star Wars brand coming in the mid 90s and saving that one as well. George Lucas, I sincerely believe that George Lucas and Walt Disney are cut from the same cloth. They were geniuses and visionaries. When people told them no, they found a way and made things even better than anyone could possibly imagine.
Yeah. And, I think we all have, the three of us, you who was also listening, if you were ever a Star Wars fan, we have those memories and those moments. I remember as a kid going with my dad and him. We bought all the different ships and all the different characters and going home. And I still remember having the TIE fighter and putting the batteries in for the first time and hitting that button on the back and hearing the sounds of, the laser cannons. And my brother had that huge, gigantic Death Star. And then even in 99, when I was once again so excited for what was coming, going as somewhat of an adult with my friends and spending hours online waiting for Toys R Us to open at midnight. So to your point, we could buy all of the figures, sometimes more than one, because we thought that was going to pay for our kids' college tuition. But it is, and that's why I wanted to put the toys on there, because it's such an integral part of not just our Star Wars fandom, but I think so many other fandoms that have come to follow. So
it's not next to my list, but I have a bunch of stuff about the toys on there too. I mean, just again, the early bird special, the fact that they were able to sell a cardboard box with nothing in it because the toys weren't ready, because they had no idea, in a sort of a similar way to how when Toy Story came out. And, they didn't realize that Buzz and Woody were going to be these massive, massive global phenomenon. So they didn't produce enough toys and they would sell out so quickly. It wasn't until May of 1978, a significant amount of time, almost a year, 9 months after Star Wars originally comes out, that the first action figures even come out into stores. In fact, I had a C-3PO and a Stormtrooper action figure before I ever saw Star Wars, because of the way that it happened to work out. And then when The Empire Strikes Back came out, they parsed them out slowly too, because they didn't know it was going to be the colossal hit that it was going to be. And then Return of the Jedi came out, and then all bets were off, and then everything was an action figure. You get an action figure. You get an action figure.
Look, I remember, because and again, we can do an entire show just about the collectibles. Maybe one day we will, but I remember as a kid just seeing these in the Sears catalog or whatever it was, these figures and these characters that I've never seen anything like before. We had bought into it, like you said, before we even saw frame one of the film. And we mailed away and we waited for those little white boxes to come in the mail, for those mail away figures to come for many, many years after. So we'll have to do a top 10 Star Wars toys collectibles show at some point in the future.
I mean,
yep.
Go ahead, Ryan.
So what's interesting is Dan mentioned something in the 60s, and both of you have mentioned Walt. And one of the things that struck me, Lou, when you and I were working on the Star Tours documentary that we did, and I was talking to the Imagineers who did Star Tours, and I said, tell me, what was it like for George Lucas to come into your room, your Imagineer playground, and talk about a ride? And multiple different people between Tony Baxter and Tom Fitzgerald told me that George continued to tell this story about July 18th, 1955, the second day that Disneyland was under operations. George was there. and he was like an 11-year-old kid. And he said that had such an impact on him. He not only became obsessed and a big giant fan of Walt Disney and the stuff that the Walt Disney Company was doing in the mid 50s, but it showed him that it was possible to create worlds for people to want to go to. And he had all these stories that he still to this day, you can find pictures of him recently at California Adventure with his new daughter and his new wife, because it had that big of an impact of him. Second day of park operations in 1955, that he said it inspired him to believe that telling stories like this was possible, to have immersive stories. And so much of the fact that he has said before in quotes that I found while preparing for this, that he always believed that his property Star Wars would fit well into the umbrella of what Walt was doing at the time that Walt was there. So my next on my list is July 18th, 1955. George Lucas goes to Disneyland, and it changes his viewpoints on storytelling, so much to the fact where in one of the original drafts and ideas for the first Star Wars movie, when it was still called Journal of the Wills, George wanted to do the old school Walt Disney intro where there's a storybook with a cover and it opens up and then it starts to tell the fairy tale, because George views this as a fantasy fairy tale and not necessarily a science fiction. So that's why he thought it felt in the line of that storytelling. So that, to me, George Lucas going to Disneyland in 1955 in a weird way sets off this chain reaction. And then we talk about Dan's 1962 moment and all these other things that happened later. It's a funny chain of reaction, but he said to this day, it also could influence why he sold it to Disney, why he wanted to do a Star Tours attraction or Captain EO or Indiana Jones to begin with, because he was enthralled with the Disney company from July 18th, 1955 on. So that's the next on my list.
I'm smiling silently because I love the fact that the two of you came in with such interesting perspectives on these important, iconic moments that did not necessarily take place on screen. I was waiting for you to sort of battle it out, in terms of who was going to mention Anakin and Padme, rolling around in the fields first. But I like where you're going with this instead. So, Dan.
Well, you took my next one, so thanks. I'll mark that up. But let me
I was under the impression that was going to be a top 10 show. Top 10 things we love about that scene. Probably not going to happen. So my next one is another one before Star Wars was even written, before he took pen to paper. He loved movie serials, which is, of course, gave birth eventually to Indiana Jones and the great action hero that Harrison Ford later portrayed on the silver screen. But he loved science fiction, and he loved the Flash Gordon serials. He loved them so much that he wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie. So he went to King Features and he made this proposal, and he was ready to make a Flash Gordon movie. And they said, that sounds great, but we get 80% of the gross, and the great Fellini is going to have to direct it. Well, George thought that was a terrible idea, but he was a new up and comer. American Graffiti hadn't quite, it was a massive, massive hit. But so that gave him a tremendous amount of clout in Hollywood, but not to the degree that he could say, no, I think 80% is ridiculous. So he eventually decided, to take bits and pieces. And if you watch the recent making of The Mandalorian from season 2, which talks about the finale of season 2, what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni say is, when you want to make Star Wars, you don't go to Star Wars, you go to what inspired Star Wars, Kurosawa, Flash Gordon, movie serials, things like that. Those are the things that are very much part and parcel of what went into the creation of A New Hope. And it's because, again, I just love this theme so much, because I experienced some of that when I was younger, or even when I became a teacher, when these no's open up the doors to yeses that are way better than you could possibly dream. So he used the rejection of the Flash Gordon business and what happened with that to create his own mythology. And it turned out very well.
I love that as well. And I'm really happy about that, too, because we wouldn't have gotten the Sam Jones Flash Gordon in the 80s with that amazing.
And the Queen soundtrack. Yeah.
And we wouldn't have gotten the cameo in Ted. So.
Sam Jones.
All right. Listen, I am surprised this fell this far down the list, but I cannot hold this one in any longer. Because, again, I want to take you back with me. And you probably have your own version of this story to the early summer of 1977. And I can see, like it was yesterday, walking down to like the second or third row in this incredibly packed theater at Middlesex Mall in South Plainfield, New Jersey, to watch this thing called Star Wars with my father. And I was sitting at the end and he was to my right, and the lights dim and this opening crawl comes and we're like, what is this? Like, we're looking at each other with this weird smile on our face. And then we're in this sort of vast blackness of space. And the camera moves down slowly and we see this planet off in the distance. And there's this low hum of, we'll get to the music at some point later. And this ship comes sort of hurling over our heads. And we can hear this incredible sound of the laser fire behind us. But the music starts to build. And when that shape, that triangle, sword-like shape, honed to a very fine point, starts to come over, and it goes on and on and on, and we realize that this is this gigantic space battleship. I remember looking up at my dad, and his eyes were as wide as mine with this grin on his face. Seeing that blockade runner and the Star Destroyer, I didn't know the names of the ships. I didn't need to, right? But that opening of that film is, I'm not going to keep repeating that it's iconic, but it did it. It changed everything. Like it did. It changed everything. And it has been something that has continued. I'm thinking of the Spaceballs version of the parody, so many times. But I remember that moment as clear as day. And then, we might have had a bootleg copy that we would watch at home and on our grainy VCR after hundreds of times with my brother. And that opening scene, that introduction, that appearance of the person that we would come to know as Darth Vader stuck in my mind. And I think those first few minutes of the opening scene of New Hope are some of the most impactful and important movie milestone moments in cinematic history, period. Fight me.
No, it's I think it's to go back to like the idea that we want to go I think the thing about Star Wars that maybe separates it from other franchises, why like Galaxy's Edge is so important, because you wanted to go there. Like, I think everyone's like, I want to experience that. I mean, there had been other movies that take place in space, right? Including Star Trek, including 2001, A Space Odyssey. But there was something different about Star Wars. And I think those opening scenes and the characters you got introduced to in that first movie and sort of the things that you saw, it was just such a stark visual. I hear people tell me all the time, and I experienced it as well. It was like seeing those droids walk in the desert, all in that opening part of the very first movie. Was just like, I want to go there. I want to experience that. I want to see, that's a universe that I feel like really does exist. And I think that set the tone in those first few shots. And you were just so enthralled without a lot of dialogue being spoken at all. And that's really what set the tone. So that is definitely, it's not on my list, but it definitely would be on any other list. I would definitely put that on there.
It crossed my mind. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, because that's where our minds were blown. And how many countless filmmakers have said that moment changed them, inspired them. That was the lightning rod for countless generations of people who fell in love with this franchise, with myth, with storytelling, with Joseph Campbell. I mean, it changed everything. It changed everything for me. I didn't know movies could be like that. And like you, Lou, when I think about Star Wars, especially as a young man, I remember fondly wonderful moments and memories of my family when I was growing up. And we didn't have a lot of them growing up. My parents ended up getting divorced. But the moments with Star Wars legitimately, and I mean this without any hyperbole, were some of the finest moments when the four of us were a unit, a collective. And just like a found family in A New Hope, that was something that stuck with me and still does to this day, which is why I pass it on to my kids, like we all do.
And you both pass it on to the people that, read what you write and hear what you say on your shows. And it goes to how impactful that moment was, because it has this incredibly long tail domino effect years, decades, and generations later.
So my next one on the list is one that actually comes from the least grossing box office Star Wars movie and the least critically rated Star Wars movie. It got the lowest ratings by critics, and it was actually the lowest box office, not even close. And that is from the 2008 Clone Wars movie. And it's not necessarily because of the moment. The Clone Wars movie, for those of you who don't know, were just 4 episodes thrown together because George said, let's see if we can put this on a big screen. It wasn't actually designed to be a movie. And if you've never seen the Clone Wars movie, I will give you a little short Cliff Notes version. Basically, Jabba the Hutt's son, Stinky, gets taken by Anakin and Ahsoka to get delivered back to Jabba. That's so again, Stinky. I'll just allow you to really think about that.
That's his nickname.
And I mean, I'm trying, if you're trying to piece together, why would a Star Wars movie be that low critically rated and that low box office? Because the plot of the movie was Stinky to get reunited with his dad, Jabba. So, but I will say there was a moment in that movie, the 2008 Clone Wars movie, that has honestly, in a way, helped define story decisions that are still being made in the Star Wars universe to this day. And it was the moment that Ahsoka Tano came down the ship and we were introduced to Anakin Skywalker's apprentice. And it didn't make sense at the time. How could Anakin, in between these 2 movies, have an apprentice? Where is this character in Revenge of the Sith? A lot of people did not like this character. They called her annoying. Who is this? And yet there is an entire series that is about to start filming and will come out in the next year or 2 titled Ahsoka. And she's getting her entire live action series. That decision, that the idea that Ahsoka was a character that nobody liked at first and now is one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise. The actress who brought Ahsoka to life, Ashley Eckstein, helped define a lot of fandom for girls and women with her clothing line, her universe, and really gave a voice to a lot of people who felt like they didn't have a voice. And she inspired and still inspires to this day tons of both boys and girls as she goes out to different places. And at the same time, Ahsoka was a main storyline in Mandalorian season 2. She's actually the one that told us what Baby Yoda's name was. It's Grogu. And also on top of that, a lot of story decisions between Rogue One and the new series, The Bad Batch, and The Mandalorian, with characters like Bo-Katan and other storylines there, have all come out of Lucasfilm Animation. And that was the first time we really got to see Lucasfilm Animation, the department, with the Clone Wars movie in 2008, and that character coming down the ship in 2008, Ahsoka, versus the Ahsoka that we see and the way that people view her, what is this, 13 years later, it was a monumental moment. We didn't know that at the time, but it still is having its effect felt to this day and for probably many decades to come, including that movie was the head man for that movie was Dave Filoni, who is now doing interviews on Good Morning America. And you hear people like Carl Weathers talking about how big of an impact Dave Filoni has made on his career. And Jon Favreau, everywhere he goes, it's like a package deal. It's Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. And all of that sprung out from the least viewed, least box office grossing, and least critically acclaimed Star Wars film, the Clone Wars movie. And then that character in particular, Ahsoka Tano, has defined fandom for thousands upon thousands of people, including people naming their kids Ahsoka. I have met at Star Wars Celebration, many people come up and they'd say, "Oh yeah, this is my daughter Ahsoka," and it's just all came down from that moment of Ahsoka coming down the ship. So we're still feeling the effects, and it's so modern, maybe it doesn't seem right, but that 2008 Clone Wars movie is still impacting the decisions that Disney makes now and Lucasfilm on stories and all those other things I mentioned.
That's a great pull. I admittedly have not seen that film or in its individual pieces or collectively as a whole. I will say that not Ahsoka the character, but Ashley Eckstein and her universe is on my list because, exactly to your point, of what she did for Star Wars fandom, specifically for an underrepresented and underserved segment of fandom for such a long period of time, which were young girls, right? There weren't, not to tell her story, but she would say that she herself and other people would go and there wouldn't be costumes for them to get or characters they could relate to. And the fact that she took her fandom and made it and created something, and the Her Universe brand is remarkable. I have the utmost admiration and respect for Ashley as a person, as an actress, as an entrepreneur. She's also like the nicest, sweetest person in the world, which makes it even better. But what she's done for fandom and the way it has been served and grown absolutely necessitated her to be on my list because I think it's almost less about her as Ahsoka than her as the fan.
I yes to both of those. To me, Ahsoka is one of the top fictional characters of all time in any franchise, in any line of fiction, period, because of what she stands for, who she is, how she carries herself. And at the exact same time, Ahsoka Tano and Ashley Eckstein have inspired countless boys and girls, especially young girls, because of the determination, the grit, not unlike George Lucas himself. And I think that's a great pull, Ryan. And I love that movie, by the way. I saw it the first showing. I remember thinking, this is sort of probably cringeworthy in a few parts, but it's got Christopher Lee, it's got Sam Jackson, it's got a great cast, and it's got some stellar lightsaber sequences that are still some of the best in Star Wars, by the way. And you just have to ignore all the extra Hutts because they can get a little tedious.
Yeah, Google Zero the Hutt if you don't know who that is. But
yes,
one
of the least cool characters ever.
That movie really helped change animation in a certain sense. If you listen to Dave Filoni talk about how they made those episodes, they shot it like a live action movie using brand new technology, which is right out of George Lucas's playbook. He said, if we're going to do animation, we're not going to just do the same old thing. I want to do it a new way that's never been done before. So the movie is technically, especially for 2008, a really interesting movie. So yeah, it is a little odd at points, but it is a technically advanced animated movie for the time of 2008. And if you watch some of the stuff Lucasfilm Animation is doing now, it all started right there with those 4 episodes. And so it's been a big part of fandom. If you've not watched any of Lucasfilm Animation's stuff, I would recommend it. It is top level animation and storytelling, and it is making impacts on the Star Wars galaxy. And it did all start back in 2008. So
I love it. Dan?
All right, my next one is the one. So call off the dogs. This is the one. This is the winner right here. May 2011. George Lucas is getting ready to open Star Tours. The Adventures continues. He and Iger have a little breakfast at the Hollywood Brown Derby. He just celebrates his 67th birthday. George Lucas does and says, you know what? I'm not done. But when I am, I could conceivably sell to Disney, to you. And Iger's like, oh, okay. Finishes his Cobb salad. And then most likely, excuse me a moment, George, probably goes in the bathroom and does cartwheels, I would say. And then we know the story. October 30th, 2012. This is the moment for me. I was sitting at my soon-to-be kitchen table. I was sitting with my fiance, and my friend Corey Club texts me, and it says, this is what it says. I have goosebumps right now. George Lucas sold Lucasfilm and Star Wars to Disney, and they're making 3 new movies, episodes 7, 8, and 9. What? I start screaming, and my fiance says, what's wrong? Are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. Disney just bought Star Wars, and they're making episodes 7, 8, and 9 for 3 days straight. That's all I could think about at school, at home. At every meal, finally, my soon-to-be bride is like, okay, that's great. I'm very excited for you. I could not believe it. And at that time, we're in this miasma of Family Guy and Robot Chicken parodies, which are fine. They're fine. But Star Wars is more than silly parodies and fart jokes, okay? Star Wars is the modern mythology that Americans have, that we share with the globe. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is the heart of storytelling in American cinema and mythology. And when I knew that Disney was going to take the reins, I knew it was going to take Star Wars into places that had never been before, and it would ensure that Star Wars would survive. I like Star Trek, But Star Trek doesn't have the same kind of pull that Star Wars does. It doesn't. That you'd be disingenuous to think otherwise, because look at what's happened. And it could have easily slipped into parodies and nostalgia only, because Disney is progressive and is always moving forward with theme parks, with Disney Plus, with comics, with animation, and more films. I knew that Star Wars was going to survive because of Cobb salad. Thank goodness for the Hollywood Brown Derby.
I love that story, and I think so many people, myself included, tried to figure out, how does that happen? Like, who calls who? How does this conversation start? Like, hey, you want to buy Star Wars? Sure. What do you want for it? Like, do you take PayPal? Can I Venmo you? Do you take Bitcoin? Like, to know that is sort of how and where the conversation took place, because it's the moment that shifted everything. And I think we all had that moment of excited disbelief that Disney was buying Star Wars, the only company that could and should buy it and take over those reins. And to your point about getting away from the parodies, it even shifted in the parks. Like, remember Star Wars weekends? There were all these Star Wars dance parties and hyperspace hoopla, and Boba Fett and Darth Vader doing sort of all these modern dances of the time. All that went away. And all that went away over time and said, look, we're going to start taking this seriously again. And we're going to represent Star Wars in the way that it was, and the continuing on of this storytelling. And a lot of those, remember, they even made little like Muppet Star Wars crossover figures, of which I still have some in my garage, mint in box just in case. But those things all went away because there was this shift, and there's been this incredible, and I think we're all going to talk about it in different ways, this renaissance of Star Wars fandom that has come, to your point, from that Cobb salad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And George, honestly, I think we all kind of, like, when that day happened, and I remember I was about to be out of college, and I was visiting my parents that day in 2012, and my dad goes, "Oh, hey, Disney bought Star Wars." And it was like, oh, of course. Like, it was like, of course I didn't at the time. He goes, "Oh yeah, and they're making new movies." And then I had to get mopped up off the floor. But I was like, of course that makes sense. I loved Star Tours at the time. I loved the original Rex version. I mean, it made sense there. And you didn't see the big Star Tours banner at a Disney park and go, "That's weird." It just always kind of seems like it fit. And Dan mentioned the parks and Disney Plus, and as Disney evolves as a company and innovates, they have the franchise that has always evolved and innovated right there with them. And so it allows people like my son and I to get ready in 2023 to go see Rogue Squadron, and now I get to have that moment that me and my dad had, and and we get to go see movies in the theaters, and it's all because of that Cobb salad, but also because George had the foresight to say, this is the right company. This is the right company for my franchise, because they're always going to push things forward too. And that's George's, just like Walt Disney. George's really his MO and his directives to his team and his company, ILM and everything else since day one, has been do the impossible. What's not been done before in storytelling and technology, do that. And there's no better company to slide that company into than Disney, because that's kind of their directive, is do the impossible. And so to have those two together, it's just the fruits of that are already paying off.
As a really quick side note, Bob Iger's autobiography is tremendous. There's one chapter where he talks about in details buying the company from George, and how hard that was for George Lucas. And it's a lovely, lovely story. It's captivating. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I wonder how many times George was like, "What did I do?"
There was some of that, actually. He had a very hard time letting go of these characters that were like his family, like his kids, and it's really, really touching.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear. Give a little bit almost more time, because I think I sort of get the sense that there's some things he does. I don't think he regrets giving up, but you can see he seems to almost be having a tough time letting go of those decisions that he gave away the right to be able to make. I'm going to shift away from the one that I want to mention so desperately, because I think this one is so important, and I don't want you to steal it, because I think that of all the things that we have mentioned, and forgetting the stuff that happened before, but of all the things that we've mentioned, this next entry on the list, almost more than anything else, defines Star Wars. It is the one true constant in this entire saga of the Skywalkers. It has transcended Star Wars, science fiction, movies, even just pop culture into just sort of our culture. And what I'm referring to is John Williams. The music of Star Wars cannot be overstated its importance. We know this. Look, we have the 20th Century Fox fanfare in our head because of Star Wars. We know all of these songs in sort of everyday life, not just from the movies themselves. More importantly, we know, like, how many movie scores can you hear in your mind the same way that you can? And the brilliant composition of these, 40 to 50 different themes that are recurring, that represent different plot elements and different characters. Like, remember the first time you heard the Imperial March in Empire, right? It wasn't in A New Hope. The first time you heard the Imperial March, like, I almost had the Imperial March on my list as its own, because it was that, like, there was this. And then try and watch Star Wars without music. Like, you ever watch a scene without any music at all? And even scenes like the cantina scene, which has this diegetic music that we don't just hear, but the characters hear, right? It's not just background, but it's something that exists, and how that song too sort of transcends the four corners of the film itself, without going off on a potentially very long just ode to John Williams. Star Wars isn't Star Wars without him, and I will say that to the day I die, because I can almost argue that, other than a film that is an actual musical, Star Wars, the music of Star Wars, is so defining of the film itself that without it, Star Wars is not Star Wars, and we're not talking about it today.
You'll get no argument from me. I mean, John Williams, it's long been said, and Lucas has said many times, that John Williams is the oxygen of Star Wars.
Yeah. And we talked about this. I remember these conversations we were having in the lead up to The Force Awakens, and it was like, what can J.J. Abrams do to make it seem like a George Lucas Star Wars movie? And we've found ourselves discovering that so many times George would lay out and allow John Williams to tell the story of the scene. So whether it's the Anakin Obi-Wan fight in Revenge of the Sith, there's not really dialogue during their lightsaber fight until the very end, when Anakin is getting grilled, to burn to a crisp. But up until that, the Battle of Heroes, which is what the song is called, is telling the story. And actually, one on my list, I'm going WDW Radio style because I think we're on number 14. But one of the ones on my list was the Duel of the Fates fight in Episode 1, Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon. That fight, there's no dialogue, not until the end. And that song, Duel of the Fates, is telling the story. And you still, as soon as you hear that choir start to sing immediately, you're taken there. You're taken to that moment where Darth Maul, that second blade comes out that we all saw in the trailer. And it's all, you don't realize that there's no words being spoken there. George Lucas would lay out and go, John, you tell the story here. Just go. And there's so many moments that are defined by the music. And you talked about the merchandising. A lot of people back in the 70s and 80s, back before, home video, a lot of people don't realize this. That wasn't a thing. You didn't go rent it from Blockbuster or go buy the movie and bring it home. You had to get a bootleg copy out of a brown paper bag somewhere. And so a lot of people, their home movie experience was the soundtrack. They'd close their eyes or they'd pull out their Kinder action figures, they'd put the soundtrack on, and they were rewatching the movie at home that way, because the music is that powerful that George, he allowed John to tell the story of Star Wars with him, and a lot of times for him. He would say, here's a scene, and Attack of the Clones, which I know Lou is probably number 1 or 2 on your list for favorite movies. Across the Stars, that love theme defined that movie over everything else. That's one of the most memorable things about that film is the love theme between Anakin and Padme. So even a movie that a lot of folks, I personally like it, but a lot of folks don't like it, will say, oh, but the greatest thing about that movie is Across the Stars, the love theme. And so that's 100% agreement. You'll get no argument from me. That is John Williams. There is no George Lucas without John Williams, in my opinion.
All right, and let's all admit it. Like, that song came out, we loved it, and we loved that scene. How many times did we try and figure out what they were singing? Like, what were the lyrics to it? Like, and if you really want to have like an entertaining time, I think if you Google Duel of the Fates, like misheard lyrics, there's somebody actually did this incredible rendition where it's not the real lyrics, but there are words that sort of fit in, like corn on the cob, Dracula, like, and it all fits, and it's incredibly hysterical. But Duel of the Fates was on my list as sort of an asterisk to that, and I agree 1,000%.
Well, how about the fact that the soundtrack for A New Hope, which wasn't A New Hope till 1981, by the way, it was top the Billboard charts. A classical soundtrack, a double album, was tops of the Billboard charts. I mean, that tells you something about the power of that music and its ability, along with the figures, to tell the story at home when you don't have streaming and things like that. You have to get something kids called a Betamax to watch Star Wars, and that wasn't until years later.
And you mentioned that. Oh, I'm sorry. But you mentioned that classical was topping the charts. Dan, I think we all know that famous story of the studio telling George, this is the 70s, you need a disco soundtrack. And George was like, no, I'm not doing a disco soundtrack for this film. And to the chagrin and the disagreement of 20th Century Fox, George said, I want John Williams. I want a classical score. I do not want disco. And people are like, no, disco is where it's at. And I don't know if Star Wars with a disco soundtrack is quite the same film.
Well, Migo had that famous little hit. I thought for sure, Lou backed me up here, that Ryan was going to say, well, I wasn't born when disco was a thing. I thought for sure we were going to get that.
Yeah, my grandparents used to listen to disco. The only version better than Migo is the Bill Murray singing the Star Wars theme on Saturday Night Live.
Definitely.
Have you guys ever heard of records? Somebody mentioned that. I've never heard of that. But what's a record?
Oh, I'll show you one.
One day I'm going to bring over an 8-track, and I'm just going to put it in front of you and just see what you try and do with it. Trying to figure that out.
I still have my Star Wars 8-track over here, actually.
All right.
I think we're on. Ryan, your next one?
Is that right? That's going to conclude part 1 of our look at the top 10 and obviously more important moments from Star Wars history. Obviously, we're very, very passionate about the topic. There's a lot to cover. And as much as I intended to keep this relatively short, clearly there's a lot that we want to share, and hopefully you do as well. So please tune in next week, and of course, come and discuss this week's episode over in the WDW Radio Clubhouse at wdwradio.com/clubhouse.
This is the Nick Winters Show, and I do the entertaining, thank you. Let's go out with something really hot for these folks. A big hit out of 77. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Give me the Star Wars, don't let them end. Star Wars, if they should bar wars, please let these Star Wars stay. And hey, how about that nutty Star Wars bar? Can you forget all the creatures in there? And hey, Darth Vader in that black and evil mask, did he scare you as much as he scared me? Star Wars, those near and far.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I invite you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World's history, or see how well you pay attention to the details in what you see, hear, remember, or even taste. If you think you know the answer, you can enter for a chance to win a Disney Prize package. And once again, this week's trivia contest is brought to you by you, because as part of the WDW Radio Nation, you literally have helped continue to bring every single episode of WDW Radio to life, every live broadcast from the parks, the contests, the giveaways. They are all thanks to you. You can find out how you can help the show for as little as $1 a month and get cool exclusive rewards every month like scavenger hunts, group video calls. We have a private Facebook group, shirts, stickers, monthly care packages, and so much more. To find out more, including how by being part of the Nation family, you're also helping our Dream Team project, which benefits the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America, you can go to wdwradio.com/support. Now, before we get to this week's question, we're going to go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So last week I asked you to simply tell me what Disney Springs restaurant is in the former location of the Adventurers Club. First, thanks to the hundreds of you who entered, got this one correct. No, it's not the Boathouse, surprisingly, but it's the Edison. The Edison opened back in 2017, and it took over an area that was occupied mainly by the Adventurers Club and a little bit of what was the BET soundstage area. And what you might not know is that the Edison here in Disney Springs is actually modeled after a West Coast version of the same name, the Edison in Los Angeles, which has the same very early 1900s look and feel that the Disney Springs location has, although the Los Angeles version was actually built in the real sub-basement of an electric power plant. Anyway, I took all the correct entries, randomly selected one, and last week you were playing for a WDW Radio pin and keychain, which you can only get by winning a trivia contest prize and a special bonus prize as well. And last week's winner, randomly selected, is Andrew Dandridge. So Andrew, congratulations. I will get your prize packet out to you right away. If you played last week and didn't win, that's okay, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So I literally just came back from the grand opening of the Space 220 restaurant next to Mission Space in Epcot Center. It is amazing. You can go and check out the live video replay, including full walkthrough, full experience, full tour over at facebook.com/WDW Radio. I'll also post it on the WDW Radio blog as well. So this week's question is to tell me, what attraction did Mission Space replace? It's that simple. Or is it? You have until Sunday, September 26th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to go to WDWRadio.com, click on this week's podcast. Once again, you are going to play for the pin, the keychain, and a mystery bonus prize. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in this and every week, and I hope that you enjoyed our conversation about these incredible, magical moments from Star Wars. Please stay tuned next week for part 2, but in the meantime, please come and share some of your favorite Star Wars memories or moments over in the WDW Radio Clubhouse at wdwradio.com/clubhouse. That is our fun, family-friendly, very, very welcoming, and of course free group over on Facebook. You can also connect with me elsewhere on social. I am at Lou Mongello on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. Or better yet, you can call the voicemail. Share it. Let me hear your Star Wars memory, and I'll play it on the show at 407-900-9391. That's 407-900-WDW1. In addition to the podcast, please don't forget to join me this and every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for WDW Radio Live. That is our live video broadcast on Facebook, either from the parks or at home, where we talk about this week's Disney news, our Disney Plus pick of the week, this week's podcast, my top 5 live, your questions, comments, and more. Again, every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And be sure to turn on notifications, both in the Clubhouse as well as on the WDW Radio page over on Facebook, as I often go live from the parks at unscheduled times as well. Speaking of live, I will be live on October 1st for the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World from Magic Kingdom. Again, make sure you turn on notifications. And if you are going to be in Magic Kingdom, I will be doing a meetup on that day. I'll have more information about exactly where and when as we get closer. Just want to make sure I don't conflict with anything Disney has in store. And the following week, I want to take you with me somewhere that I've never been before, but I'm so excited to go for the very first time, because I'm going to be live from New York Comic-Con, October 7th through the 10th, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be sharing both live video on Facebook as well as a lot of Instagram stories and pictures. So please make sure to follow me and turn on notifications on Instagram at instagram.com/Lou Mongello. And speaking of doing these things together, don't forget that you can still join us for our Marvel Day at Sea cruise on the Disney Magic, February 5th through the 10th, 2022, out of Miami, or on our Disney Wish inaugural cruise on June 20th. If neither of those work, that's okay, because we're also going to do one on December 5th, a special Very Merry Time cruise on the brand new Disney Wish as well. You can find out more, get a free no obligation quote by visiting www.radio.com/events. One more event that I want to remind you about that it's not necessarily Disney related, but it takes place in Disney and it's going to incorporate a lot of Disney in it as well, because my Momentum Weekend Workshop, November 13th and 14th, with an optional mastermind day on Monday the 15th, now has only 7 seats left. And Momentum basically is a way for you to help turn what you love into what you do. It is a 2-day interactive workshop limited to just 50 people in Walt Disney World, where I and other speakers and entrepreneurs share practical and tactical strategies inspired by the Disney parks, as well as other lessons, tools, and resources. More importantly, we're going to show you how and why to apply them to your life and business. And if you're still deciding if Momentum is right for you, I want to give you a little bit more information and context about some of the sessions that are going to include the Sorcerer's Workshop, where I teach you how to apply some of those lessons from Disney to your business. We're going to cover email marketing, productivity, time management, content repurposing, building community, launching your idea, your brand, your business, or your blog, making impossible goals possible, overcoming some of those struggles that we as entrepreneurs face, audio, video, live, tools, networking activities, table talks, support stations, future of social, and the oh-so-very fun fireside chat. To find out more, to secure your seat, or if you want to ask me a question, you can visit loumongello.com/momentum. I have extended the $100 off both the weekend workshop ticket and the Mastermind Day ticket discount until September 30th, so you have just a few days left to take advantage of the discounts. Huge thanks, as always, to some of the new and longtime members of the WDW Radio Nation family. I sincerely appreciate your love, support, friendship, and help, and I love being able to give back to you each and every month. I want to thank some new and longtime members, including Brittany Pritchard, Sabrina McDonald, and Jamie Kersey. Again, to find out how you can be part of the WDW Radio Nation family, you can visit www.radionation.com. And if and when you're looking to book your next trip to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Aulani, Disney Cruise Line, or anywhere on this big, blue, beautiful world of ours, please go and visit my friends and yours over at MEI and Mousefan Travel at mousefantravel.com for all available discounts, the best possible prices, all at no cost to you. And finally, my friend, and you are my friend, whether we have met yet or not, all I ask is that if you like the show, please help spread the word. Tell a friend, share out that you're listening on social, post a link to this or one of your favorite episodes, and let your friends know why they should subscribe and listen as well. And if you can, take just a couple of seconds to rate and review the show over on Apple Podcasts. It is incredibly helpful, very much appreciated. I want to thank a recent reviewer, Loose Tune, who says, Lou, I can't read this. It says, Lou is a Disney legend. That's crazy talk, but I'll read it anyway. I've been listening to Lou. Thank you. I don't take compliments well. Can you see? I've been listening to Lou since episode 1 and even earlier, so I figured it was about time I thanked him for the years of fun, information, and entertainment. I listen and enjoy every single week, and I'm with you to the end of the line. Oh, God, Loose Tune, I love this. I love you, man. I sincerely appreciate it. I'm not sure if you can tell the smile that is on my face right now. Well, if you want to leave a review as well, just search for WDW Radio and Apple Podcasts, or go to www.radio.com/iTunes for a link and instructions on how to do it. And finally, most importantly, thank you. I am giving you a big virtual hug just to show how much I love and appreciate you. I hope that you understand and believe just how much you listening means to me, and you being part of the community over in the clubhouse and part of the nation. I do this show not just because I love these things so much, but I love being able to experience it and share it with you. And I'm grateful for the gift that you give me each week of your time and your attention and the love. And if there's anything that I can do to repay those favors back to you, by all means, please reach out and let me know. So I hope to see you on the live show Wednesday, on social, and of course, here again next week. So until next time, See ya.
Hey Lou, this is Chris Whitney, first time caller. I've been listening since the beginning, but I'm calling you in regards to your September 13th show. I'm really excited because my wife and I are going on a cruise October 2nd through, well, it was originally the 9th of this year, but it was cut down to the 6th on board the Fantasy, and looking forward to that. And also, surprisingly, I'm so behind in my shows right now. My wife and I will actually be on the same exact cruise you'll be on, February 5th through the 10th. So, if I see you, I will say hi. I've seen your posts online. I know what you sound like, all that good stuff. So anyway, have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Hey, Lou, this is Kevin out in Virginia, and I only just discovered your podcast. I discovered it because I'm a huge Jim Corcus fan, and I love listening to him on another podcast, which I won't name here. And I thought to myself, gee, I wonder if he's on any other podcasts. So I Googled Jim Corcus podcasts, and your thing came up, and you not only had him on, you've got a whole page devoted to the links directly to where I can download and listen to his stuff. It's fantastic. And of course, while paging through that, I checked out some of the other stuff. I've been listening to you and your friends talking about this and that. I'm so glad I discovered this podcast. This is my second favorite Disney podcast after the other one where I first found Jim Corcus. But wow, this is excellent stuff. I'm so glad I found it. Keep it up.